To Eden Hope Academy. I am Kim and we are on week 13. So get out your books and give them a wiggle and let's start on our Bible verse. I'm going to throw it up, bing, and we're going to read this, and it says, and when your, so we need a little R after that Y, or the U. Children ask you, what does this ceremony mean? Then tell them it is a Passover sacrifice to the Lord, who passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt and spared our home. Wow, what a great verse. But let's remember our history and go back, just a little bit to, let's go to Abraham. So we had Abraham, he had two boys. They were, remember, Isaac and Ishmael. Ishmael was older. And then Isaac had two boys, and they were Jacob and Esau. And then Jacob had 12. And so one of his sons was younger, and his name was Joseph. And Joseph heard from the Lord that God told him things that were going to happen. But what did Joseph do with this information? Did he carry it in his heart and only say it, talk about it when he needed to edify someone or talk about it in a humble way? What did he do? He got, everyone put your nose up in the air. He got very prideful, didn't he? Did you know that store-bought turkeys, if you leave them out in the rain, that they can drown because they keep their nose up in the air because they're looking at the rain? It's kind of like that. So never be a store-bought turkey. Always keep your head level and be humble. So he wasn't so humble, was he? So Joseph, he bragged to his brothers about what the Lord had told him twice. 2 times the Lord had told him that people, including his family, were going to bow down to him, and twice he bragged about it. And so then his dad gave him the cool coat, the multicolored coat, and he strutted it around. And then what happened? His brothers put him in a hole, then they sold him, then he went to Potiphar's house, and he was the head of the household, so he was very trusted. And then Potiphar's wife lied about him. Total made up lie. And so he was put in jail for a long time. Now, in jail it said, in the Bible, that he was kind of in charge of the jail. So he could have run away, right? When you think about it, he probably could have gotten on a fast donkey and fled the town, or on a fast camel and gotten out of Dodge, but he didn't. He stayed there because his heart was finally humble. And then Pharaoh had the dream. Pharaoh wanted to know what it was about, that there were 7 fat cows and then 7, skinny cows. Joseph answered the dream, told him what it meant. Remember? So then they stored grain for 7 years, and then Joseph's family came when there was a famine. Joseph was able to feed his family and reunite with them. Then his family grew, and it was now 5 million people strong of Hebrew people. So it's huge now. This is like almost 500 years later, and it is a huge amount of people, and the Egyptians have enslaved them. And so now, today, we're at Moses, and remember we had the plagues in week 12. God sent plagues to have Pharaoh soften his heart, which was hardened, and finally, his people were let go. But the day before they were let go, what happened? They had the Passover. So what they did was God said to sacrifice 1 lamb per family. Now we know this lamb theme is throughout history, isn't it? And Jesus is said to be the Lamb of God. And so every family had to sacrifice 1 lamb, or groups of families could sacrifice 1 lamb together, and they put the blood of the lamb on the doorpost. So they put it on the 2 sides, and they put it on the top. Now what does that make you think of? Does it make you think of a cross? That's what it makes me think of. And so when you do that cross on your door, then the judgment that came over Egypt passed by everyone who had the cross, the blood of the lamb, on their door. And so later this year, when we've learned our dance, we are going to do a Seder just like they did. So I really want you to remember this and remember all of the history behind it, because when we do the Seder, we're going to talk about every single part of it, and it's going to be super, super cool. So right here, what I want you to do is draw a picture of people celebrating the Passover meal. Now remember, when they celebrated the Passover meal, were they lounging down? They squatted. They were standing or sitting with their sandals on and with their everything ready to go, because they knew the next day God was going to release them. And so even today, they don't sit there. A lot of people sit, but you're thinking of standing or squatting. But you have your shoes on and you're ready to go. And so either draw that, or you can just draw the 3 spots of red on a doorway for the Passover. All right, so pause, or you can listen to the next one as I go on. All right, history. And Joshua and Caleb said, the Lord which passed through the land, which we passed through to spy is exceedingly good. And if the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land that flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land. Wow! So let's think of the history here. Are you guys ready? Because this is so cool. So there were 2 young men named, what were they named? Joshua and Caleb. And they were sent with 10 other men, so there were 12 total. They were 1 from each tribe, into the new land. So Moses has just parted the Red Sea. God has parted the Red Sea. They've walked through. There's a pillar of light in front of them. So how many evidences of God do we have so far? We've got a lot, don't we? Then we've got the 10 Commandments. We have a lot of evidences of God, that God is with them. And so they send in 12 spies to the Promised Land. And what happens? 10 of them come back and say, oh, I'm worried. I don't know what to do. Everyone worry with me. Oh, is everyone worried? Is everyone worried? Go, oh. And 2 said, do not fear, because God is with us. And yeah, these guys, they seem bigger, and their armies might seem bigger, but God is with us, and he is going to make it work out. And so what did they do? Did they listen to the 2 or to the 10? They listened to the 10, and they had to wait in the desert for 40 years. Everyone go, oh. They had to wait for 40 years because of this. 40 years, it's a long time to be waiting. But that's what they had to do, because they didn't listen to Joshua and Caleb, and they didn't follow God, even though God had given them so much evidence that he was there. Okay, next, in Link It to Me, Joshua and Caleb were younger than the other spies. Oh, sorry, right here it says, draw Joshua and Caleb returning from the Promised Land. So what do you think? Were they being, oh, or were they being, yes, this is so cool, look what the Lord has done for us? Which one do you think they were being? Yeah. And oh, one other thing, all of those 10, they never got to go in, but Joshua and Caleb, they got to go in later. So it was really cool. Okay, so draw that picture. Let's go on to Link It to Me. Joshua and Caleb were younger than the other spies, yet they spoke the truth, and others spoke in fear. So they spoke in the truth of God. They knew what God had said, and they said, I'm going to do what God said, even though I'm scared. That is pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So why were the other spies fearful? Can you think of some reasons? Do you think maybe they were fearful because the other people in the land were bigger than them? Do you think maybe they were fearful because other people in the land looked stronger, looked like they had more military than they did? Like that, something like that? Maybe. I'm not sure. But I want you to talk to your mom about why they were fearful. Okay, what happened to all the Israelites because of their lack of faith? Remember? Oh, what happened? Do you remember? Did you say they had to wait 40 years? You're right, they did. All right, now we're on science. This one's really cool. This is eclipses. Eclipses occur when the sun, the moon, and the earth all come into a straight line with each other. And so we want you to draw a stunning eclipse. Now, we're probably going to have another video, or I'm going to find a video on the significance of eclipses in the Bible. But the Bible talks about eclipses happening and how God sometimes uses eclipses as a way to tell people about something, to warn them in some way. And so eclipses are something to really think about. And there have been a lot in our country lately. And there's going to be one in just another couple of years. Now, an example of that is when Nineveh, when Jonah went to Nineveh, there was an eclipse right before he got there. And the people of Nineveh probably, theorized that they probably listened to him more because there had been an eclipse. And so then I'm going to put in the video, because I always thought there was an eclipse when Jesus died on the cross. But there wasn't. There was an eclipse around there, but there wasn't probably an eclipse at that time. So I'm going to put in another video how cool that all works out. All right, and finally, the Israelites walked from Goshen to Migdol, Marah, Mount Sinai, and the wilderness of Paran, and finally to Jericho. Whoa! And finally to Jericho. Okay, so they walked all the way from Egypt. They walked around Mount Sinai, and then they walked into the wilderness for 40 years. And finally, after 40 years, they were able to go to Jericho. And what was Jericho? Jericho was a city that seemed like no one could ever get into it. It had one of the largest walls that people had ever seen, especially in that time. It was a huge wall. And so they knew they could never get into it. And do you guys remember what happened? Do you remember? Well, we're going to learn about it next week on week 14. So I want you to think about it this week so you know what happened at Jericho for next week. Okay? Now, when you go to class for critical thinking skills, I want you to really think of Exodus. And I want you to tell me in critical thinking skills why, or in leadership class, why you think that the Israelites did not go with Joshua and Caleb, did not go into the promised land after they had seen so many signs from God. And I want you to think of times in your life where you know that you've seen signs from God. And I want to know if you acted on it or if you didn't act on it, or other people in the Bible who saw signs from God, and did they act on it or did they not act on it? So I want you to think through that whole thing of those amazing signs from God, all the plagues, the pillar of light, the parting of the Red Sea, all of these amazing things that happened, and they still didn't have enough faith to go into the promised land. So I want you to think about other times in the Bible when there were signs and what people did. And then for the 10 Commandments, for leadership class, I want you to be thinking of the 10 Commandments and the ones that maybe today we think, that's not such a big deal. But remember, it's one of the 10 things that God gave us saying, do not do these things. So I want you to read through them and talk to them with your mom. And then in leadership class, I want each of you to discuss why, as a society, we've decided that some of them aren't that important, but God knows they're all important. And then finally, for critical thinking, why do I keep calling it that? Finally, for leadership skills, Joshua and Caleb and 40 years in the desert. And I want you to think about what that 40 years in the desert did for the people. During that 40-year period, they established judges. They established more of a legal system. They saw that God provided for them every single day of 40 years. They had things like their clothes did not disintegrate during that time, and their shoes stayed the same during that time. So think of the ways that God was with them, even though he was saying, now you can't go in. So even though there was a little bit of a punishment, God was still with them every day of that 40 years. And so that's something I want you to talk about in your leadership class this week. Okay? All right. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.